Welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you?
Well, looks like the fourth story tonight is going to lead to plenty of wholesome, totally not rabid debates in the comments. But let's see what happens. Today I've got a goodie bag of scary work stories for you featuring something that would make even a 150-pound dog shake in his furry boots, the lamp that changed everything, and more. These are tales from the break room. If you have a scary story of your own related to work, send it to me at eeriecast.com/submit and help us break podcast records by following Tales from the Break Room and leaving a rating and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Desert Walks from Puyu. I moved to Santa Fe for a guy. Not the proudest reason to make a move, but after 4 winters in Minneapolis watching my car get buried in snow, Joel's descriptions of year-round hiking weather and adobe houses sounded like paradise. Our relationship lasted only 8 months. The love affair with New Mexico, however, is still going strong 6 years later. By 2016, I'd built up a decent dog-walking business. I started with just a few clients, some friends and people I met at the dog park. However, Santa Fe is full of people with money and busy schedules. Within a couple of years, I had 15 regular clients and a waiting list. The work suited me. I would be outside all day and making my own hours, hanging out with dogs who were usually better company than their owners. But maybe that's just me. Most of my routes were in the foothills neighborhoods. That's where the big houses are, with views of the Sangre de Cristo mountains. They've got yards full of piñon and juniper. But I also had a few clients out on the edges of town where the houses spread out, and the desert took over. Those, honestly, were my favorite walks. Just me and the dogs for miles of red earth dotted with chamisa bushes. Well, that spring, people started to find animals in the arroyos. Not roadkill or coyote leftovers. These were different kills. A jogger found the first one. A jackrabbit laid out real neat on a flat rock. It was skinned perfectly, not a mark on the meat. Its fur was folded to the side, like someone had plans to come back and get it. More started to turn up. Ground squirrels, another rabbit, even a roadrunner. And we all knew it was the same thing doing it, because they were expertly skinned, meat left behind, fur set aside, all careful-like. There were no tracks around either, no blood trails showing where they'd been killed. Just these little tableaus out in the desert, like someone was practicing taxidermy or leaving behind art projects of the nightmarish variety. The local paper tried to blame it on Satanists. The usual suspect when weird crap happens and no one knows what's going on. But the old-timers at the coffee shop had different ideas. I'd stop in some mornings before my first pickup, and the conversation always circled back to the skinned animals. "It's not natural," Rosa would say, refilling my travel mug. "My grandfather saw something like this once, back in the 50s. Said it meant..." But she never finished that sentence. She would cross herself and change the subject. I didn't pay much attention to the talk. Every place has its stories, and New Mexico's got more than most. It comes with the territory when you've had 3 different cultures layering their stories and mysteries on the same landscape for hundreds of years. Besides, I had dogs to walk. My Tuesday route included 6 dogs, ending with Bruno out at the Hall's place. They lived on 5 acres backing up to federal land, and there was nothing but desert for miles. Bruno was a massive Anatolian shepherd, about 150 pounds of livestock guardian, bred to fight off wolves and bears. Not much fazed that dog. The Halls were in Europe for 3 weeks, paying me extra to spend real time with Bruno instead of just going for quick walks. And he needed the exercise. Working breeds like him go nuts without a job to do. So I would take him out for these long rambles into the desert, letting him sniff around and patrol while I enjoyed the peace and quiet. It was early May, that perfect high desert weather where it's warm in the sun and wonderfully cool in the shade. We were about a mile from the house, following a deer trail through a grove of junipers. Bruno was ahead of me, doing his thing, when he stopped dead. This wasn't his usual alert pause when he caught a scent of something. It was different. Every muscle he had was rigid, and his tail straightened out. A low growl came from him, a sound I'd never heard him make before. The hair on his neck stood up in a ridge. "You okay, boy?" I asked. He didn't so much as look at me, let alone perk up his ears. He stood there, staring into the junipers, growling steady like a motor. I followed his gaze, but I couldn't see anything. The trees cast shadows all around us. Could have been anything out there. But then I smelled it. It was like ripe death. It was so strong or rich, not sure which word is right, but it made my eyes water. Bruno took a step back, still growling. This dog would have chased off coyotes without even blinking, but now he was backing away from something that I couldn't yet see. There was something in those trees. "Okay, time to go," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. "Come on, Bruno, let's head back." But Bruno would not move. He was locked in place now, staring at something. And then the smell grew stronger. That's when something stepped out from behind the junipers. It was wearing coyote skin, but wearing is really the wrong word. The skin was draped over it, like a drunk person trying to put on a coat. The front legs were hanging wrong, head tilted at an angle that made my stomach turn. The skins on it were fresh. I could see them drip. I could see pink flesh where it didn't quite cover what was underneath. And what was underneath was shaped like a person. Sort of, but with thin limbs, and it moved in this hitchy way, like it was trying to remember how to walk. Its own skin showed through gaps in the coyote hides. Gray, maybe black, with a texture like leather left in the rain. It looked at us, not with the coyote's dead eyes, but with its own eyes showing through holes torn in the hides. Human eyes. I couldn't tell if they looked old or tired, angry or focused. Bruno made a sound then, like a whine or a scream. He then pressed against my legs, all 150 pounds of him, trying to hide behind me. The creature tilted its head and studied us. Then it smiled. The coyote skin even split where its mouth was, showing teeth that weren't coyote or human, but something in between. It spoke then, a single word, I think, in a language that I didn't understand, but which sounded like grinding stone. I could only guess at the meaning. My hand then shot to the bear spray on my belt. The rational part of my brain said this thing wasn't a bear, not even a normal animal, and that spray wouldn't help. But my fingers fumbled with the safety anyway. Something was better than nothing. It got closer. I saw its coyote skin shift, and I saw more underneath, other skins layered beneath it. Fur that looked like it came from a rabbit. Feathers? Something that might have been snake skin. All fresh, all wrong. Then Bruno decided he'd had enough. He lunged forward, not attacking the thing, but shouldering past it, running full speed back to the house. The force of that big dog nearly knocked me over, but it broke whatever spell was keeping me frozen, and I ran too. Behind me, I heard a strange sound. Reminded me of the calls hyenas make on the National Geographic Channel. It followed me through the junipers, sometimes from the left, oftentimes to the right, but always just out of sight. Bruno was ahead of me, running flat out. I'd never seen him move so fast. My lungs were burning within a minute, and my legs felt like jello. But I kept on running, with the smell following me. Luckily, the smell began to fade, along with that hyena-like call. I risked a look back, but saw nothing, just empty desert and our own footprints in the dust. Bruno was waiting at the hall's back gate, panting hard. I yanked the latch open in a heartbeat and got us both inside, locking it behind us. We sat there on the back porch for 20 minutes. I was trying to catch my breath, and Bruno pressed himself up against me like he was glued to me now. Eventually, I decided to call animal control, but rather than sound crazy, I told them that a wild or rabid coyote had tried to attack me and Bruno out in the woods. They took my call seriously, likely due to the rash of dead animals. After that, I gave Bruno some extra treats to help him calm down. I locked all the doors and windows, and I drove home. Back at my apartment, I turned on all the lights, and I stayed up watching TV. Wholesome stuff. A few days later, when I was back at the coffee shop one day, I mentioned to Rosa that I'd seen something strange out there, like a rabid, deformed coyote or something. She looked at me real funny and asked if it was out past the city near the old lands. I nodded, and I'll never forget what she told me. She leaned in real close and said, "You don't go walking dogs out there anymore, you understand? Some places aren't for us. Some things wear faces that aren't theirs. You're lucky to be here." I smiled and felt grateful for that message, but also disturbed. I finished out my week with Bruno, but we kept to the roads near the house. I told the Halls when they got back that he had been spooked by coyotes and recommended they keep him close for a while. They questioned that, saying that he had never been scared of a coyote before, asked me if I was certain. But I said yes, he'd definitely been spooked, and that part was not a lie. Anyway, whatever it was doing all the skinning, I think it left, because after these events, everything kind of died down. I didn't see it again. People stopped finding skinned animals. But one thing remains unchanged. I don't go near those junipers anymore. Some boundaries you don't cross twice. Still not as scary as working retail. From Bob Bingi. I've always been able to feel presences and been able to feel energies of places. I've seen my fair share of ghosts, usually shadows that I dismissed as a trick of the light, but never anything more than a fleeting glimpse, except for the story I'm about to tell you. This occurred at a former workplace. Now, I'd felt energies and seen or heard things before in this store, and the old heads in the store told me as much when I first started. But normally it was simple, like things being knocked over, items being knocked off shelves, scattered across the floor. My manager, who was a staunch skeptic, became a believer in the paranormal because of that store, after spending most of his morning trying to find the intruder responsible for noises he'd been hearing before opening, only to find nothing. Usually this activity in the store was mild. Noises, voices, shadow people, and the previously mentioned occasional cleared shelves. But one night in particular, a different entity found its way into our store. That night the store was staffed by myself and one coworker I'll call Jackie. The night started normal, but after the sun went down around 6:30, things started to happen. Me and Jackie just joked, saying, "The spook's being active tonight." But mostly we just went about our work. Though as the night went on, more and more things happened. Like me seeing Jackie on one side of the store, while they were actually on the other. That sort of thing continued for the rest of the night. Fortunately, being a small-town store, there weren't really any customers after sundown, so we got to close up quickly. This did cause me and Jackie to have to be separated, me in the back and Jackie watching the front. While we were separated, the thing finally showed itself. It had taken a particular interest in Jackie, as the entity was revealing itself in between us and kept moving closer to Jackie. The thing stopped at the counter that was the usual spot of our hyper-religious day shift worker who kept a Bible on his counter. After this, Jackie ran to the back, as they didn't want to be alone. They'd been calling for me to come back up front, but admittedly I thought they were just messing with me. After saying some less than pleasant words for leaving them alone, Jackie began to describe what happened. What they saw, they described as a demonic-looking dog with an almost human face. Naturally, I was skeptical, but I was okay to have someone in the back with me, as it was boring counting money. After we finished counting and shut the store down entirely, there was constant crashing and banging on whichever side of the store we weren't on. Until, as we were clocking out, we both saw something on the other side of the store. As soon as we tried to get a better look, it just disappeared, and the store fell silent. Jackie and I both had an overwhelming sense of relief, though neither of us wanted to stick around to see if that silence would continue. I presume it didn't, because the front door, which I know I had locked, was unlocked. I haven't had anything like that since, though the normal activity continued. Now I like to rationally explain things, but this one I haven't been able to. It was almost 2 years ago now, and I've not been able to find one, but I'm happily open to any explanations. When I was a kid, a werewolf was killed in my town. From DownADirtPath. I'm going to be changing the names of people in this story to protect their privacy. In 1993, I was 11 years old, living in a town so small, it's not even a dot on most maps. There was maybe 900 people total back then, surrounded by dairy farms and cornfields. My mom worked dispatch for the county sheriff's office, which meant she heard everything first. Dad managed the grain elevator by the railroad tracks. Between the two of them, our dinner table was better than any newspaper for local news. That's what I miss about how things were before. Those dinner conversations. Mom laughing about how one woman called the sheriff because her neighbor's rooster was crowing too early. Dad talking about grain prices and which farmers were expanding their operations. My older brother, Mark, complained about basketball practice. Normal stuff. Happy stuff. It started in late September. Mom came home from her shift looking troubled. She waited until Mark and I were supposedly doing homework before telling Dad about the calls coming in. 3 farms this week, she said quietly. They found chickens torn apart. Delbert found his hen-house looked like a tornado hit it. Blood everywhere. Dad blamed wild dogs or coyotes. We've been having a dry summer. It pushes certain animals towards the farms. But Mom shook her head. Delbert said that the door had been opened. Not broken, opened. Latch lifted clean. October brought worse. A family lost their beagle, found it behind their shed partially eaten. Then another family's barn cats disappeared, 5 of them in one night. Something was hungry, and whatever it was liked to kill. My first real understanding something was wrong came from a neighbor of mine. His family lived about 2 farms over, and we'd catch the same school bus. One Monday morning, he was pale as paper. There was something in our yard Saturday night, he whispered as the bus rumbled down the road. Dad thought he heard the goats fussing, and he went out there with a flashlight, and he swears he saw someone by the pen. Says it was a person, 2 legs and hunched over. But when my dad yelled at him, the guy dropped on all 4s like a dog and ran away. What kind of person does that? Gotta be some kind of crazy man wandering around. His dad had called the sheriff, but by the time the deputy got there, whatever it was had gone. There were tracks in the mud, human-like, with 5 toes, though from what I heard, they ended in points, either like claws or someone who had not clipped their toenails in years. Not long after that, my mom stopped talking about work at dinner, but I could tell from the tension in her shoulders, the way she'd check the locks twice before bed, that things were getting worse. Halloween came and went with hardly any trick-or-treaters. Parents were keeping their kids close. The churches canceled their harvest parties. We'd never seen that before. Even the angsty and rebellious high school kids stayed in. Our little town pulled into itself, like a turtle in its shell. And then came the night I saw it myself. I'd woken up needing the bathroom. I patted down the stairs in my socks. Our bathroom window faced the backyard, looking out toward the barn. As I stood there, I saw movement. Something crossed the yard. It walked upright, hunched over like the neighbor kid's story, its arms hanging down, more like an ape than a human. Whatever it was appeared hairy, or perhaps it was wearing shredded-up clothes. I watched it stop right at our rabbit hutch, and I saw it work the latch with fingers, human fingers. I was mesmerized, staring at this thing opening the hutch and reaching inside, and that's when I learned that rabbits can scream. Our dog started to go haywire from his pen, and the thing's head snapped around, and I swear for a second, in the dim light we had out there, I saw some of its face, eyes that reflected like a dog's, and a mouth that went out a little too far. You can call it childhood trauma all you want, but I'm telling you what I saw that night. Our dog's barking got frantic, and the thing moved towards his pen, dropping to all 4s in that horrible way the neighbor kid had described. I finally unfroze myself and ran to my parents' room, shaking my dad awake, yelling that there's something outside and that it's after Duke, our dog. Dad jumped up and grabbed his shotgun, telling Mom to call the sheriff. He ran downstairs in just his underwear. I heard the back door slam, Duke going crazy, then the boom of the shotgun. Twice. When Dad came back in, Duke was with him. He was shaking so bad he could barely walk. Dad's face was white. "Did you shoot it?" Mom asked. I don't know. Maybe. It ran away when it saw me. Jesus, I thought it was a bear. But then it stood up like a man and ran into the corn. After saying that, he looked at me and realized he shouldn't have said it. Not in front of his child. The deputy came out. He looked around with his flashlight and found blood on the fence posts. Not a lot, but some. He and my dad talked in low voices by the squad car, while Mom made me some hot chocolate and tried to pretend everything was fine. The next day, Dad and some other men followed the blood trail. They lost it by the creek, but a guy named Sam, who had the farm adjacent to the creek, mentioned he'd been missing tools from his barn, as well as clothes off his laundry line. Little things over the past month. People began to put it together. One of the local families, the Grabers, had that cousin who'd come to stay with them in August. He was a quiet guy who kept to himself, and he helped with the harvest. Thing is, no one had seen him in weeks. The Grabers said he'd moved on, headed west for more work. It was normal for hired hands. December brought snow and worse news. The killing of livestock escalated, from chickens and rabbits to goats and pigs. Always the same pattern. It would kill, take a few big bites, then have to kill again, like it wasn't satisfied with the food it got unless it killed again soon. A few months later, there came a night that finally ended it. The Weaver family lived on the edge of town in an old farmhouse. Paul Weaver worked in construction, and his wife Linda taught Sunday school. They were good people, quiet people. They had a daughter in my class. She played violin and always shared her cookies at lunch. But something or someone had broke into their house at 1:30 in the morning. The story broke in pieces over the following days, whispered by the adults who thought kids weren't listening. You see, Paul Weaver had heard glass break in the kitchen. He grabbed his deer rifle and told Linda to lock herself and Amy in the upstairs bathroom. He went down to investigate. He found a hairy man crouched over their dog in the kitchen, eating it. The man looked up at him and said Paul's name in a pleading voice, and Paul fired. Point blank, deer slug to the chest. The man screamed and went through the window, leaving blood everywhere. Paul shot at him twice more as he ran. They found the body at dawn, 300 yards into the woods behind the Weaver house, curled up under a fallen oak tree. The sheriff, the state police, even someone from the health department came out. This is where the story splits, where what happened and what we say happened became two completely different things. Officially, Paul Weaver had shot a wild man, a crazed drifter who had dinned up in an old barn and gone mad. The state took his body to test for rabies, and that was case closed. Paul even got a certificate from the mayor for protecting his family. But I heard differently. Heard it from Mark, actually, who had heard it from his girlfriend, whose dad was one of the deputies on scene. They didn't just find a drifter out there under the oak tree. They found the Graber's hired hand, what was left of him. And I'm not talking about the gunshot wounds. The body had been changed and twisted, caught between what he'd been and what he'd become. Something covered in hair from head to toe, and with a jaw that extended a little too far, still wearing the remnants of clothes. The health department people took the body away in some special truck. The remains were cremated, they said, due to disease risk, even after it had been studied. The Grabers left town within 6 months, and the Weavers lasted until spring, before moving on to Florida. Everyone else just agreed to forget. The town healed quick. By the summer of '94, you'd never know anything had happened. New families moved into the empty houses. Life went on. But the subtle things changed. People put up bigger fences, better locks. Motion lights became standard. And nobody, I mean nobody, talked about what Paul Weaver really shot in his kitchen. I stayed and finished school. Got a job at the post office as a mail carrier. Not married yet. At this point, I think I missed my chance. Some people think that I'm odd, just the lonely middle-aged mail carrier. I really just don't think about it. Every day, though, as I drive these roads and deliver mail to farms, I'm watching, keeping an eye out, because I was only 11 years old when I learned that monsters are real. Sometimes those monsters are people, and sometimes they're something else. This man ruined my life. From 88 Dairy Girl. This was 2018, at a home goods store in Burlington, Vermont. I'd worked my way up to assistant manager. I had good benefits and decent pay, and I was happy, really happy. Sure, part of that was the job, but mostly it was Drew. Drew and I had been living together for 2 years in this tiny apartment overlooking Lake Champlain. Expensive as all get out, but worth it for those sunrise views. Drew worked IT for the university, which meant his schedule was predictable, while mine was all over the place. But we made it work. It helps when you have plans for those few days off that you both have. For example, on Sunday mornings, we would go to the farmers markets, and on certain weeknights when we went to bed together, we'd snuggle up with his cat, named Monster of all things, sprawled between us. He proposed that April, right there in our kitchen, while I was complaining about a customer who tried to return a clearly used shower curtain. He got down on one knee and everything, between the fridge and dishwasher, offering a ring and a box he'd hidden in the pasta jar. I said yes while crying and laughing. We were planning a small fall wedding. Nothing fancy. Family and close friends at most, and we'd be going to his parents' place in Maine. I found my dress at a thrift shop too. Drew would be wearing his one good suit, and we'd be getting flowers from the supermarket. It was going to be perfect. That is, until he walked into the store. I was working the closing shift. Just me and my coworker Nathan in the store. It had been a quiet Tuesday night, with maybe 3 or so customers in the last hour. Some guy came in at around 7:30, and I noticed him right away. Hard not to. He was a real tall guy with dark hair and the kind of jawline you would see in cologne ads. He was wearing an expensive-looking suit, which was unusual for our store. We mostly got college kids and young families. He wandered around for a while before coming to my register with a set of kitchen knives. He made a joke about being a bachelor who couldn't cook, but figured good knives might inspire him to. I gave him a courtesy laugh and rang him up. I did the usual retail small talk. Then I asked if he wanted to sign up for our rewards program. That's when he said, "Only if you put your number in," he said, smiling in a way that made his intent clear. "Oh, that's flattering," I said, keeping my voice light and professional. "But I'm actually engaged." I wiggled my ring finger, where Drew's grandmother's ring caught the lights. "Lucky guy," he said, still smiling. He then took his knives and receipt. "Have a good night." I forgot about him immediately. Good looking or not, just another customer. Sometimes they flirt, and that's just part of retail. You smile, you stay professional, and move on. I had a wedding to plan and a life to live. But he came back the next week. He bought dish towels this time. Week after that, a lamp. Always my register, even if Nathan was free. He was very charming every time, always with little compliments that danced right on the edge of appropriate. "That color brings out your eyes. You have such a great laugh. You must make this place a lot of money with that smile." I stayed polite but distant. I mentioned Drew whenever I could work it into conversation. "My fiancé loves these towels. I'll have to tell my fiancé about that recipe." Clear signals that I wasn't interested, wasn't available, without being too rude. Nathan noticed after the 4th visit. "That guy's got it bad for you," he said, after the guy left with a shower caddy he definitely didn't need. "Yeah, well, he'll get over it," I said. "I mention Drew every time he comes in." "Well, maybe you should be more direct." "I am direct. I literally showed him my engagement ring the first time we met." Nathan shrugged. "Some guys don't hear what they don't want to hear." I should have listened to Nathan. Should have been ruder, blunter. Maybe asked him to stop coming to my register. But I'd been in retail long enough to know that rejecting the wrong male customer too harshly could go bad fast. There's a chance they might complain to corporate, leave a nasty review, sometimes even wait in the parking lot to continue the conversation. Being polite but distant usually worked. They'd get bored, move on, get the hint. But this man, I never even learned his name. He didn't get bored. By August, he was coming in twice a week. He would buy random stuff he couldn't possibly need. A dozen throw pillows or multiple sets of sheets. One time I swear he bought enough candles to stock a cathedral, and he'd always look for my register, and his smile soon became something that made my skin crawl. The comments began to escalate too. "When are you gonna let me take you to dinner? A beautiful woman like you shouldn't be working so hard. Your boyfriend doesn't know how lucky he is." "Fiancé," I corrected him. "And I'm just not interested in dinner. Thanks." Can't blame a guy for trying. He'd say something like that, like this was all a game. I started to switch registers when I saw him come in, letting Nathan handle him. But he'd wait, pretend to shop until I was free. One night he stayed until closing, buying things one at a time to keep coming back to my register. I finally told Drew about it. We were making dinner. Monster was all excited about something, weaving between our feet hoping for dropped food, I guess. "So, there's this customer who keeps hitting on me," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "It's getting annoying." Drew looked up from the onions he was chopping. "You want me to come by? Show him you're taken?" "No, it's fine. I'm just venting. I can handle it." I should have said yes. Should have let Drew come by. I should have done a lot of things differently. One day I was working a rare day shift because we had inventory that night. Drew had the day off and decided to surprise me with lunch. He came in around 1 p.m. with sandwiches from our favorite deli. He kissed me hello at my register since the store was empty. It was sweet, normal, the kind of thing he did sometimes because he was thoughtful like that. Together we ate in the break room, talked about wedding stuff. His mom wanted to invite some cousins we'd never met, and my dad was insisting on making a speech, even though public speaking terrified him. Drew kissed me goodbye at my register on the way out. He said he'd have dinner ready when I got home. 20 minutes later, the guy walked in. His face was different. That charming mask he wore was gone. He came straight to my register, and I knew something was wrong. I started to call for Nathan, but he already started to talk. "So that's him. That's what you're choosing over me." "I need you to leave," I said, reaching for the phone to call security. We didn't have security, but sometimes the threat helped. "He's nothing special. IT guy? I could buy and sell him." "Leave now, or I'm calling the police." He laughed. "For what? Shopping?" Then Drew came back in. He'd forgotten his work badge in the break room. He walked right past the guy to get to the employee door. What happened next happened so fast, I still sometimes dream it in slow motion, trying to see the moment that I could have changed things. The man grabbed a ceramic lamp from an end cap display. Heavy thing, meant to look like driftwood. He swung it at Drew's head from behind. Drew never stood a chance. He simply couldn't have seen that coming. Drew went down hard, blood immediately pooling on the white tile floor. I screamed. Nathan came running. The guy dropped the lamp and walked out like nothing happened. He just walked out while I fell to my knees beside Drew, trying to stop the bleeding with my hands, screaming for someone to call 911. Drew was in a coma for 4 days. Skull fracture, brain swelling. I lived in that hospital, held his hand, talked to him, played his favorite songs. When he woke up, I sobbed so hard they had to sedate me. I explained to him what happened. The man was arrested the same day of the event. He had a very bad history, apparently. Restraining orders from 2 other women, and an assault charge that he had pled down to. He's in prison now, 8 years. Not enough if you ask me, but something. Drew recovered, eventually. It took months of physical therapy and cognitive therapy, headaches that still come and go. But he recovered, and then he left me. Not right away. He stayed through the worst of it, through the therapy and the court dates and the nightmares. But something had broken between us that couldn't be fixed. After I told him the story of what happened and explained everything, he blamed me for not being firmer with the man, for letting it escalate, for not telling him sooner about it. You should have had him banned from that store, got a restraining order. Should have told him directly, "No, I don't want to talk to you and I'm not interested in you." Did you ever tell him that? And as I was about to reply, I realized whenever I told him no or that I wasn't interested, it wasn't at him, but rather towards his proposals. He kept going. Instead, you worried about being polite while he was planning God knows what. I tried to explain about retail, about the way women have to navigate these situations carefully, about how I tried to handle it without making it worse. But Drew had a traumatic brain injury because a man could not accept that I wasn't interested. He needed someone to blame besides a stranger in prison. So he blamed me. We broke up. I helped him pack. Drew let me keep Monster because his new apartment didn't allow pets. I sent the wedding dress to Goodwill. Moved to a studio I could afford alone. The thing is, I understand why Drew blamed me. It's easier than accepting that sometimes terrible things happen, and there's nothing you could have done differently. That being polite isn't a crime. That saying I'm engaged should have been enough. The only person responsible for that violence is the person who committed it. I stayed in therapy and worked through the guilt, the what-ifs, and the trauma of seeing someone I loved bleeding, almost dead, on the floor. My therapist tells me I did nothing wrong, that I handled it like most women would have. I'm told that the man would have escalated whether I was polite or rude or even absolutely evil towards him. I believe her, most days. I'm not the same person I was before. I'm more cautious and less trusting, quicker to set boundaries. But I'm okay. I have Monster and a job I'm good at, and a life that's mine. That's enough. Most days, that's enough. What do you guys think? The night I wasn't alone. From Anonymous. I used to drive for Uber, and you're about to see why I don't anymore. I was doing it for a while, mostly to make ends meet. This happened one night a few years back. My last pickup had been at 8:45 p.m. Some drunk college kid needed a ride from downtown Asheville back to his parents' house in the suburbs. It was a 40-minute drive each way, but he tipped good and somehow managed not to puke in my car, so I counted that as a win. By the time I dropped him off and started heading home, it was pushing 9:40. I could have taken the interstate, but the highway cut 20 minutes off my drive. The road that wound through the mountains with thick forest on both sides, and there were no lights for miles. During the day it was scenic, but at night it was just dark. I drove a 2009 Chevy Cobalt. It handled the curves okay, but the engine had been making a weird rattling sound for the past week. I had to ignore it. I couldn't really afford a mechanic. The breakdown happened so quick I barely had time to pull over. 1 second the engine was running and the next it just died. No warning lights, no gradual loss of power. Just immediate silence except for the sound of tires on asphalt as I coasted to the shoulder. I tried the ignition 3 times before accepting that my car was kaput. Perfect, I muttered and pulled out my phone. The screen showed exactly what I expected, that I had no service. This road was notorious for dead zones. The mountains blocked out most cell towers, and nobody lived out here to complain about coverage. I sat there for 10 minutes, hoping that another car would come by that I could flag down. But there was nobody, not even any distant headlights. The rational side of my brain knew someone would eventually drive through, but sitting in a dead car in complete darkness has a way of making rational thought a bit difficult. Finally, I grabbed my phone and backpack and started walking. The plan was simple. Walk until I found cell service, call my dad, and wait for rescue. He'd be teed off about driving out here so late, but he would come. He always would. The forest on either side was so thick, I couldn't see more than a few feet past the trees. My phone's flashlight function made a small circle of white on the asphalt, but somehow that made the darkness around it even worse. Every couple minutes I would check for signal, but nothing. After about a mile, I got a single bar. I tried calling my dad, but the call dropped immediately. I tried texting instead. Car broke down on 19, walking to find signal. The message showed ascending for 30 seconds before failing. So I kept walking. It was then that I saw them. 2 figures on the side of the road about 50 feet ahead of me. As I got closer, I could see they were children. 2 girls, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing what looked like school uniforms. They were wearing plaid skirts, white shirts, dark sweaters. They stood perfectly still on the shoulder facing the road, and at first I thought they were statues, maybe some oddly shaped signs. This was setting all the red flags off in my head. It was now past 10 p.m. on a remote highway. No broken down cars nearby besides mine. No adults in sight either. Just 2 kids in school clothes standing in the dark, like they were waiting for the school bus. I slowed down but kept walking. Maybe they needed help. Maybe their family's car had broken down too and the parents had gone for help. But as I got closer, this feeling hit me. The one you get sometimes when your instincts scream that there is something extremely dangerous going on, even though your eyes can't see why. The girls turned toward me in perfect unison. Their faces were pale in my phone's light and expressionless in a way that made my stomach turn a bit. One girl had dark hair and pigtails. The other was a blonde in a bob cut. Both smiled at exactly the same moment. "Excuse me, sir," the dark-haired one said. Her voice was way too formal for a child. "We're walking home. May we join you?" The dread that washed over me like a big black wave was instant and overwhelming. This wasn't exactly fear, but something deeper. My body wanted to run, but I forced myself to keep walking at the same pace. Something inside told me do not even acknowledge them, even though my mind insisted. "Don't speak to them," my body said. "Don't even look at them." "It's very dark," the blonde one said as I passed. "We don't like walking alone." I kept my eyes on the road ahead and didn't respond. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped my phone. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Light, slightly quick footsteps, the kind children make. They were following me. "Sir, we just need to get home. Our mother's worried." The dark-haired one's voice was closer now. I picked up the pace, but the footsteps behind me sped up to match. My brain was screaming at me that these were just lost kids who needed some help. But my instincts, my ancient lizard brain, I guess, said otherwise. The way they moved and spoke, the way they even just existed in this space, felt fundamentally wrong. These 2 children were setting off primal predatory vibes. It felt like a velociraptor from Jurassic Park was stalking behind me, not 2 schoolgirls. "Please," the blonde one said, and now she sounded like she was right behind me. "We're so tired. We've been walking for such a long time." I finally risked looking back. They were maybe 10 feet behind me, walking hand in hand. In my bouncing phone light, I caught a better glimpse of their faces for the first time. Their eyes were completely black. Not dark brown, not dilated pupils, but black from edge to edge, like pools of sludge. I couldn't help myself. I ran then. Behind me, the footsteps continued at the same measured pace. They didn't run after me, just maintained that steady walk, and yet somehow they kept up. Every time I looked back, they were the same distance behind me. Black eyes reflecting my light like cats. "Why won't you help us?" one of them called out. I ran harder than I'd run since high school track. My backpack was bouncing against my spine and my chest was burning. But I still didn't slow down. The road curved ahead and I followed it, hoping to see headlights or a house, anything. And then I saw the car parked on the shoulder. My dad's beat-up Ford pickup, hazard lights blinking. He was standing beside it, his phone up to his ear trying to make a call. When he saw me running towards him, he started to jog to meet up with me. "What the heck is happening? Been trying to call you for an hour. Your location showed you stopped moving, so I—" "Get in the truck," I gasped, pulling him toward the vehicle. "Please, now." He must have seen something in my face because he didn't even argue. My dad not arguing with me. Pretty crazy stuff. We both climbed in, and he began to pull away. I looked back one more time. The two girls stood exactly where I'd left them, still holding hands. They weren't looking at us. They were looking at my broken-down Cobalt in the distance, walking toward it, the same way they'd been walking before. "What's wrong?" my dad asked, checking his mirrors as he accelerated. "You look scared out of your mind." I told him straight up. Two creepy girls were following me. Girls with jet black eyes. He giggled at first, but when he saw my expression wasn't changing, he believed me. I then told him thanks for coming to get me. Without him, I don't know what would have happened. Right in the Thrift. From Jozzy. I work at this thrift store, where Thursday nights are donation sorting nights, which meant I had the whole store to myself until midnight. It would be me, a box cutter, and whatever random possessions people had decided they couldn't live with anymore. The radio played oldies to keep me company, though the signal always went fuzzy around 10 p.m. Goodwill paid better, but our place had character. Sure, the aisles were a little cramped, and it always smelled like laundry detergent and dust, but I liked it there. Well, still like it here. The place used to be a funeral home back in the 40s, I've heard, and our owner, Barb, thought it was hilarious. She'd say death and retail both involve moving inventory. The basement still had the original tile from the embalming room. We used it for furniture storage, though nobody liked going down there alone. The fluorescent lights took forever to warm up, leaving you in the dark for just long enough to imagine things. The first month I worked there, I thought that the cold spots were just bad insulation, something you'd get from an old building with drafty windows. But cold spots shouldn't follow you, right? They don't cluster around certain donation bags or hover near the closing rooms at closing time specifically. And they definitely don't whisper. It began as just sounds I blamed on the heating system. I even heard little sighs when I priced items, like someone was looking over my shoulder and disapproving of the price. Fabric rustled in the racks when the air was still, and there would be footsteps on the second floor when I knew I was alone. Barb never acknowledged it directly, but she did have some rules, like never working alone after midnight, always announcing yourself when you entered the basement, and if you hear your name get called, do not answer it, unless you can see who's speaking to you. Just common sense, she'd say. But common sense didn't explain why she kept a box of salt behind the register, or why she burned sage on the first Monday of every month. The worst nights were when fresh donations came from estate sales. People's whole lives would be packed away into boxes. This smelled like medicine and old age and grief. Those nights, the store felt crowded even when empty. Price tags would flip over on their own, showing different numbers, and clothes would slide off hangers in perfect sync, like dominoes kind of. I've seen the cash register ring up sales when no one was touching it. One of the other clerks who'd been working there longer than anyone told me it was just residual energy, which I'm not sure what that meant, but she did explain that when people leave pieces of themselves and their belongings, strong emotions soak in like smoke, and the store just holds on to them. But in this place, it feels less like holding and more like hoarding. What with all the stuff we have in here. The basement was the worst. Even during summer, your breath would fog down there. Didn't make any sense. The furniture arranged itself differently each morning. I once found all the dining chairs arranged in a circle, with the seats facing inward, like someone was holding a meeting in the dark. During my first summer, we had 3 employees quit. One quit after she was locked in the bathroom for 2 hours. Another left after finding handprints on the side of the donation bin. Small, little, child-sized handprints. The third one just stopped showing up. Barb hired a replacement without any comments. Me, I'm still sticking it out. Been here longer than most people. It's a cozy job with cozy people. Well, the ones that are still around. If I can think of any more thrift store happenings, I'll let you know. The place is always doing something weird. Goodness, so many poor animals being attacked in these stories lately. If you're a cute little dog listening to this, be safe, my friend. Go find the coziest little corner with your favorite bone and just enjoy life. Good night. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tales from the Break Room. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails. Be sure to look up Tales from the Break Room on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and leave us a follow and a